Every single year, the global education system spends billions, and I mean with a B, billions of dollars on training teachers.
Oh, absolutely. Oceans of capital.
Right. Governments, international NGOs, these massive philanthropic organizations, they just pour money into, developing the perfect pedagogical
And
manuals.
funding those massive conferences.
Exactly. Sending experts across the globe. And yet, every single year, a huge portion of that money effectively just vanishes. The moment a teacher actually walks back into their classroom,
It just evaporates.
it totally evaporates. The training is gone. The needle on student outcomes barely twitches. And, for you listening, this is the multi-billion-dollar question, right? Why?
Yeah, and today we are actually looking at a groundbreaking document from January 2026 that finally, I think, proves exactly why that traditional system is broken.
And more importantly, how a really specific group of visionaries actually fixed it.
It really is a watershed moment. The document we're unpacking today is the Nepal Close to Research Professional Learning Community's Pilot Evaluation Report. Or, because the world of education just loves an acronym.
Loves an acronym, yeah.
The CtR-PLC report.
Right, CtR-PLC. And just to set our mission for this deep dive, we are exploring a quiet but absolutely profound revolution in how we teach the people who teach our kids.
We really are.
We're going to be examining some incredibly comprehensive pilot data from 4 really diverse community schools in the Kathmandu Valley.
And this entire initiative, it was backed by a deeply robust international partnership, right? Between Kathmandu University, Tribhuvan University, and Anglia Ruskin University.
Which is huge. The scope of what they achieved here is remarkable, especially given the historical context of educational development in South Asia.
Yeah, which has traditionally been, frankly, highly centralized and quite rigid.
Very rigid. But before we even touch the data, I want to explicitly frame this deep dive around the architects of this chain.
Oh, we have to.
Because reading through the source material, it hits you immediately. This isn't just some dry academic paper.
No, not at all.
It's the culmination of decades of grueling, often completely unglamorous dedication by specific people. It's a human story.
It absolutely is a human story. And if we're talking about the architects, we have to pause and highlight the monumental contributions of this team, especially singling out Professor Dr. Laxman Nawale from Kathmandu University.
Yes. If you want to understand why this pilot succeeded where so many international interventions fail, you have to look at his foundational work, right?
Precisely. Professor Nawale didn't just, participate in the educational system in Nepal. In many ways, regarding language education, he built the modern architecture of it.
Let's actually unpack his background for you listening, because it isn't just context, is it?
No, it's the literal infrastructure that made this project possible. We're talking about the man who essentially led the establishment of both the undergraduate and graduate programs in language education at Kathmandu University.
Wow. He founded their Department of Language Education.
He did.
Which is staggering. I mean, when you think about the bureaucratic, financial, and institutional hurdles involved in building a department from the ground up in any university.
Let alone in a developing educational landscape.
Exactly. That requires a singular kind of vision.
It really does. Yeah. And beyond the university walls, his leadership as the president of Delta.
That's the Nepal English Language Teachers Association, right?
Correct. His time at the helm of NELTA is crucial here. It means he has been at the absolute forefront of teacher education, professional development, and inclusive education for years.
He hasn't just been sitting in an office.
No, he has spent his career traveling to rural districts, sitting in actual classrooms, and listening to teachers. His deep systemic expertise is the bedrock here.
Because he understands not just the high-level theory of education, but the lived, breathing, often, struggling reality of Nepali schools.
And he brought an incredible powerhouse of a team with him to this project.
Yeah, the report highlights an amazing group.
You have Dr. Ganga Gautam from Kathmandu University and Tribhuvan University, who brings this incredibly vital background in policy research and systemic equity.
Right. And then from the UK side, Dr. Phil Kirkman from Anglia Ruskin University, who has been pioneering these close-to-research partnerships.
Plus, we have to mention the amazing supporting team that the report highlights, right? Carrie Ho, Chandi Gabata, Deborah Cause, Dean Barber, and Sarah Wall.
What is genuinely extraordinary to me about this specific group coming together is the epistemological stance they took.
That's a great way to put it. They didn't do what so many international partnerships do.
Right, which is just to drop a Western, heavily funded model into South Asia and expect total compliance.
Exactly. They built a bridge grounded in profound mutual humility and a shared frustration with the status quo.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because while this study is explicitly rooted in the Kathmandu Valley, the fundamental problem that Professor Nawali and this team are solving is a universal crisis.
It's a global issue.
It's the exact same crisis causing teacher burnout in London, in New York, in rural Australia.
Oh, completely.
We are going to look at what happens when you completely invert the power dynamic of education, when you stop treating teachers as mere implementers of someone else's external training.
And start treating them as researchers, as the authors of their own professional destiny.
Right. But to appreciate the elegance of the solution they design, we first have to thoroughly dissect the broken system it was meant to replace.
We have to look at the trap of what the report calls the cascade model.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We know that top-down training exists, the idea of a central authority designing a curriculum and passing it down the chain.
Right.
But let's look at the psychological and structural reasons why this specific model, this cascade, has maintained such a stranglehold on global education systems, despite everyone seemingly knowing it's flawed.
Well, the traditional teacher development landscape is heavily reliant on external, often donor-funded projects, right?
Yeah.
The fundamental assumption of the cascade model is that knowledge is a transferable commodity.
Like handing someone a box.
Exactly. A central authority, maybe an international NGO or a Ministry of Education, decides on a quote-unquote best practice. They train a small group of master trainers.
Right, the elites.
Those trainers go to regional centers to train local trainers, who then go to schools to train the teachers. It cascades down.
And the report specifically cites the extensive literature documenting the absolute failure of this approach. They talk about attenuation.
Yes.
Let's define that clearly for the listener. In this context, are we talking about the literal watering down of the training materials as they get passed from person to person?
It is exactly that, but it's more insidious than just a game of telephone.
How so?
Attenuation here refers to the loss of context, nuance, and the actual why behind a practice. By the time a pedagogical strategy reaches a frontline teacher in a crowded, under-resourced classroom, it has been stripped of its theoretical underpinning. It just becomes a list of arbitrary steps.
It sounds like we've been handing teachers a highly technical recipe book written by a chef in a five-star restaurant.
Yeah.
But the teacher is working in a kitchen with a broken oven and missing ingredients.
That is a perfect analogy.
And then we blame the teacher when the souffle falls.
Exactly. We blame the frontline worker.
But I have to challenge this, though. Let's play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
If you are a Ministry of Education or a massive donor agency, and you are responsible for, say, 30,000 schools across radically different geographic regions,
Right.
you kind of have to have a centralized system, don't you? You have to have a spreadsheet that proves you are doing something.
You do.
You can't just tell 30,000 schools to follow their hearts and hope student literacy improves. Doesn't the cascade model exist out of sheer political and logistical necessity?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of organizational psychology, you've just hit the nail on the head. It exists because of the structural illusion of control.
The illusion of control.
Centralized cascade training looks incredibly efficient on paper. It satisfies bureaucratic accountability.
Right. You count the widgets.
You can count exactly how many master trainers were minted. You can count how many teachers attended the 3-day workshop in the hotel conference room.
Yeah.
You can tick a box for donor compliance and say, well, we have modernized the workforce.
But the spreadsheet is lying.
The spreadsheet is absolutely lying. It's measuring attendance, not integration. It measures compliance, not transformation.
Wow.
And the report explicitly details the pressures these teachers are under. They face high-stakes accountability regimes. They deal with frequent, whiplash-inducing policy changes from the top.
And their actual teaching conditions are often incredibly demanding, right?
Unbelievably demanding.
And on top of all of that, there's this modern, aggressive demand for teachers to be, quote-unquote, evidence-informed.
Yes.
The system demands that teachers use the latest cognitive science, the latest behavioral interventions.
But this is the crucial disconnect. They are demanded to be evidence-informed without being given the time, the structure, or the agency to actually engage with that evidence.
Right.
It's an expectation of implementation without the conditions for integration.
Yeah.
They are treated as conduits for policy rather than intellectuals in their own right.
It's like trying to grow a tropical plant in a desert by just handing the gardener a really detailed, peer-reviewed instruction manual on photosynthesis.
I love that.
The problem isn't the manual. The problem isn't even the gardener's ability to read the manual. The problem is the soil.
Yes.
And when the plant dies, the system blames the gardener for not reading the manual correctly.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
The cascade model ignores the soil. It ignores the fact that pedagogical knowledge must be contextualized.
Give me an example of that.
Well, a specific behavioral strategy that works flawlessly for engaging a wealthy student in a well-resourced London suburb
Right.
might completely fail to engage a student in a rural Nepali community school, or even a different school just down the street in Kathmandu.
Because the context isn't just background noise.
Exactly. The context is the actual medium of the work.
So we've established that treating knowledge as a generic, transferable commodity doesn't work. The soil matters.
It deeply matters.
This brings us to the paradigm shift championed by Professor Nawali and his team. If transmitting generic knowledge is a dead end, what is the alternative? Let's dive into the Close to Research Professional Learning Communities model.
The CtR-PLC model is a radical relocation of power. As we noted, the framework has its origins in the east of England, spearheaded by Dr. Phil Kirkman's work at ARU,
Right.
but the transition to Nepal wasn't a copy-paste exercise.
And the report is very explicit about the cultural translation that occurred. This wasn't just an imported solution.
It couldn't be. And that is where the brilliance of the Nepali academic team really shines. They adapted the fundamental philosophy to resonate with the specific, lived realities of Nepali schools.
So, what is that core philosophy for you listening who might be new to this?
It posits that teaching improves most meaningfully when teachers work together on questions that emerge organically from their own classrooms.
Not from a textbook.
Exactly. Using evidence gathered from their own students and supported but emphatically not directed by university partners.
What's fascinating here is how this completely relocates the production of educational knowledge.
It takes the authority of knowledge creation and physically moves it out of the university lecture hall.
And out of the donor's air-conditioned head office.
Yes, and places it directly onto the muddy ground of the school. The school itself becomes the primary site of knowledge production.
Which fundamentally changes the role of the university.
It does.
And as I was reading this section, what really fascinated me wasn't just the data, but the profound shift in ego required here.
Oh, the ego shift is massive.
The university professors, individuals who have spent decades becoming the undisputed experts in their fields, they had to act as what the report calls boundary-holding partners rather than epistemic centers.
That phrase, epistemic center, is so crucial to unpack.
Let's do it.
Traditionally, a university is an epistemic center. It is the center of knowing. They hold the truth, they hold the research, and they dispense it to the masses.
Right.
In the CtR-PLC model, the university consciously steps down from that pedestal. They hold the boundary of a safe space so the teachers can figure out the truth of their own local context.
Let's really put ourselves in the shoes of the trainers for a moment.
Okay.
You are a brilliant academic. You walk into a room of struggling professionals. They are looking at you, waiting for the answers.
They want you to tell them what to do.
Exactly. How difficult is it psychologically and professionally to consciously choose not to give them the answers? To say, look, I don't know the answer for your specific classroom. Let's find out together.
It is incredibly difficult. And it requires a complete overhaul of what the report terms the relational stance.
The relational stance.
Yes. The facilitators from KU, TU, and ARU literally walked with the teachers.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, when a teacher presented a problem, say a group of boys refusing to participate in reading,
Okay.
the facilitator wouldn't say, oh, here is the research-backed solution for boys' literacy.
Right. Here's chapter 4.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead, they would offer questions. They would offer reading resources to spark debate. They would ask, what specific data could we collect in your classroom next week to understand this specific group of boys better?
It's moving from being a mechanic who fixes the engine to being a mirror that reflects the engine back to the driver.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it.
And that requires immense trust, particularly in systems that are traditionally very hierarchical, where questioning authority or, admitting you don't know an answer is seen as a weakness.
Precisely. You're asking teachers who have been conditioned for their entire careers to wait for instructions from the top, to suddenly step into the void
To claim interpretive authority over their own work.
and admit their vulnerabilities to their peers. It is a massive psychological leap.
So we have this beautiful, radical philosophy, but philosophy without mechanics is just poetry.
Right.
How did this actual pilot operate in the real world of 2024 and 2025? Let's get into the dirt of the methodology.
The logistics of the pilot were incredibly intentional. They scoped a cohort of 60 teachers spread across 4 diverse community schools in the Kathmandu Valley.
Okay.
And the methodology they used to evaluate this entire process was explicitly designed to be non-extractive.
Let's unpack non-extractive, because academic research in the developing world has a very, very dark history of being highly extractive.
Oh, incredibly dark.
Researchers swoop in, they mine the local population for data, they publish a paper in a Western journal behind a paywall, and leave the community exactly as they found it.
Exactly. The project team was fiercely protective against that dynamic. First, the facilitation was conducted entirely in the Nepali language.
Which wasn't just a convenience, was it?
It was an epistemological necessity.
Right.
Translating an educational concept isn't just swapping words. Words carry cultural, emotional baggage.
Nuance.
Deep nuance. By operating in Nepali, they ensured deep, nuanced understanding and allowed the teachers to express complex professional anxieties comfortably.
And I noticed a really specific detail in the report. They explicitly chose to use non-recorded focus groups.
Yes, they did.
At first glance, from a purely data gathering perspective, that sounds crazy. Why would you not record your focus groups? Don't you lose all the data?
They did it to ensure absolute psychological safety. In a hierarchical culture, if a teacher knows they are being recorded for a formal university study, they're highly likely to engage in the compliance behaviors we talked about earlier.
They will say what they think the esteemed university professor wants to hear.
Exactly. By putting the recorders away, the team opened the door for genuine, vulnerable, completely unvarnished reflections about what was actually feeling in their classrooms.
So they sacrificed a perfectly clean audio transcript to capture the actual truth?
I did.
That is brilliant. The report also mentions they utilize JISC survey tools. For the listener who might not be familiar with that landscape, what does that mean in this context?
So JISC refers to digital survey and data analysis tools widely used in UK higher education, which the ARU partners helped integrate.
Okay.
But they weren't used to test the teachers. They were used to capture self-assessed confidence levels and to help the teachers identify their own developmental priorities.
So the data was for the teachers.
For the teachers, not just about the teachers. Alongside this, they used collaboratively written case reports. The teachers themselves were co-authoring the findings of the pilot.
This brings us to the actual topics the teachers chose to investigate. Because when you finally give frontline workers the agency to research anything they want, what they choose is incredibly revealing.
It tells you everything you need to know.
They didn't pick abstract pedagogical theories. They picked immediate bleeding neck problems.
They absolutely did. The themes of inquiry they settled on were deeply grounded in the messy reality of the school day.
What were they?
They looked at student attention and engagement. They investigated foundational literacy of basic skills. They focused heavily on supporting struggling or, what this system sometimes labels slow learners.
Right.
They looked at behavior and classroom management, and they explored authentic technology-enabled learning.
I want to focus on that for a second. Why do these specific topics matter so much more than what a centralized ministry might choose?
Well, think about the perspective.
If you are a policymaker in a capital city, you care about aggregate test scores, national ranking, and curriculum milestones.
Exactly.
But if you are a teacher looking a child in the eye, you care about why that specific child can't focus, or why they are struggling with basic phonics while the rest of the class moves on.
And that shift in focus completely changes the motivation. In the cascade model, the motivation is external compliance. I have to implement this literacy strategy because the ministry mandates it.
It's a chore.
In the CtR-PLC model, the motivation is internal curiosity and professional empathy. I need to figure out why this specific child in the third row is falling behind, and I have the power to investigate it.
But I need to push back here on the mechanics of this quote-unquote investigation.
Okay, go for it.
The word research sounds very clinical.
Yeah.
It evokes white lab coats and double-blind studies. Are these teachers suddenly expected to run formal academic experiments with control groups on their 10-year-olds?
Oh, no, no.
Because that sounds like an impossible burden.
That is a vital distinction and a major misconception about the close to research label. It does not mean turning teachers into lab scientists.
Good.
It's about structured, reflective inquiry. It is about a teacher deciding to notice patterns intentionally.
Give me a tangible example of what that looks like on a Tuesday morning.
Okay, let's say a teacher is struggling with student engagement. Research in this context might simply be trialing a micro-pedagogical change.
Micro-pedagogical change? Like what?
For example, altering how they ask questions for 10 minutes a day. Instead of asking a question and calling on the first hand that goes up, they institute a think, pair, share routine.
Okay, so a small tweak.
Exactly. The evidence collection isn't a complex statistical analysis. It's just the teacher intensely observing who speaks up, noting the quality of a specific homework assignment, or asking the students for brief feedback.
And then the magic happens when they take those observations out of isolation.
Exactly. They bring those micro-observations back to their professional learning community for collective interpretation.
They sit with their peers and say, I tried this. It failed miserably.
Yes. Why do we think that happened?
Yeah.
It's making the invisible, tacit mechanisms of learning visible to the group.
So we know what they did and how they did it without turning into lab rats. But what actually happened to the teachers who went through this process? Because the report details some serious, paradigm-shifting aha moments.
The transformation in the teachers is arguably the most profound finding in the entire document. It centers on a massive shift in their professional identity.
How so?
They evolved from seeing themselves as passive implementers of training to becoming active authors of inquiry.
The report calls this the process-to-person shift. Let's unpack the philosophy behind that phrase.
For generations, teachers have been conditioned to hunt for the correct process.
The silver bullet.
Yes.
Yes.
They attend seminars, hoping to be handed the 10-step guide to perfect classroom management, or the bulletproof formula for teaching fractions.
Right.
It treats teaching as an entirely epistemological act, just a transfer of knowledge using a specific tool.
Like using a wrench.
Like using a wrench. But through this pilot, the teachers started understanding professional development not as acquiring a new technique, but as an inquiry into their own lived human encounters with their students.
It's the realization that teaching is ontological. Knowing the material, being a specific kind of person in the room, and the act of doing the teaching are all entirely messily entangled.
Yes. You can't separate the teacher from the technique.
And the catalysts for these massive realizations weren't sweeping policy speeches. They were tiny, hyperlocal moments.
The report identifies them as critical incidents.
Let's explore these critical incidents because they are the emotional core of the report. A critical incident isn't necessarily a massive crisis, is it?
Not at all. It's a small, everyday event that suddenly takes on a massive symbolic charge.
Give me an example from the text.
The examples provided are incredibly poignant. It's a teacher conducting a routine home visit and suddenly realizing the severe systemic economic barriers a specific child faces.
Which completely changes how that teacher views the child's lack of focus.
Exactly. It's no longer an attention deficit. It's exhaustion. Or it's a child's unexpected vulnerable disclosure during a lesson. Or it's simply a failed classroom routine, a moment where a teacher tries a new, highly touted activity and it completely embarrassingly falls apart.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of organizational development, the report ties these critical incidents to a phenomenon known as symbolic emergence.
Yes, and this is a profound concept.
It really is.
In any organization, particularly in schools, there are deeply held tacit meanings.
Tacit meanings, like what?
These are the hidden assumptions we make about certain groups of students, our unspoken beliefs about what pedagogical styles work, our unacknowledged biases.
We usually don't talk about them because they are invisible to us.
They are the water the fish is swimming in.
Precisely. Symbolic emergence is the moment where an event occurs, like that incredibly awkward, failed classroom routine, that forcibly brings those hidden assumptions up to the surface.
It suddenly breaks the surface tension.
Right.
And because this is happening within the structured safety of the CtR-PLC, that failure doesn't result in shame.
It becomes a tool.
It becomes available for the whole group to interpret, to question, and to learn from collectively.
It's exactly like when you're watching a really complex movie, right? Like a thriller.
Okay, I'm tracking with you.
You're slightly confused about character motivations for an hour, and then a tiny, seemingly insignificant background detail A photograph on a desk, a passing line of dialogue is revealed.
And suddenly it all clicks.
Suddenly, violently, it explains the entire plot. Everything snaps into focus. These teachers are experiencing that on a professional level.
They are?
They are suddenly seeing the actual plot of their students' learning barriers rather than just treating the symptoms.
And the power of the community aspect is that because they are sharing these critical incidents, the learning isn't isolated to one classroom.
The whole school learns.
The entire group benefits from that sudden clarity. They build a shared language, a shared professional vocabulary around the actual lived reality of their specific school.
Now, as an outside observer, it is incredibly tempting to stop right there.
It really is.
To roll the end credits, play some uplifting music, and say, wow, this pilot worked beautifully because the teachers were inspired, they found their agency, and they cared about their kids.
The feel-good ending.
Right. But the report explicitly, forcefully argues that inspiration is absolutely not enough. Agency in a vacuum does not survive.
It does not.
We have to look at the hidden architecture of the schools themselves.
This is where the evaluation report elevates itself from being a simple, heartwarming success story into a profound piece of systemic organizational analysis.
Okay, let's get into it.
It introduces the core aid framework.
Okay, let's unpack this. Core aid. That stands for culture, organization, and relational emergence.
Correct. And to truly grasp the weight of this framework, we have to make a critical distinction between two completely different types of analysis.
What are they?
First-order analysis and second-order analysis.
Walk us through the difference, because this is the crux of why systems fail to scale, isn't it?
It is the entire ballgame. First-order analysis looks exclusively at what is visible in practice. It's what the teachers actually did.
Okay.
It catalogs the topics they chose, how often they collaborated, the new questioning strategies they trialed in the classroom.
It captures all the beautiful aha moments and critical incidents we just discussed.
Yes. So first-order analysis is just watching the action on the stage.
You're evaluating the performance.
Exactly. Evaluating the performance. But second-order analysis shifts the camera entirely.
Where does it look?
It looks away from the stage and looks at the organizational conditions that made the performance possible in the first place.
Ah.
It looks at the structural integrity of the stage itself, the lighting rigging, the theater management, the budget that allowed the actors to rehearse.
This raises an incredibly important question, which the report tackles head-on.
It does.
If a teacher goes to an amazing training seminar, learns a fantastic evidence-based technique, goes back to their school, and completely fails to innovate or implement it, whose fault is it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Is it a lack of individual competence and drive, or is it a failure of the organizational environment?
Historically, policymakers almost universally blame the teacher.
Of course they do.
They say, we gave you the evidence-based tool, we paid for the seminar, why aren't student outcomes improving? You must be resistant to change.
Right. The lazy teacher narrative.
But second-order analysis recognizes a harsh truth. If the school's structural architecture doesn't actively support innovation, even the most inspired, dedicated teacher will inevitably revert to the status quo just to survive the week.
I am looking at the data and I'm realizing an aha moment doesn't pay for the time it takes to have one.
No, it doesn't.
If the school bell rings and a teacher has 40 kids waiting and 3 reports due, that inspiration simply dies on the vine.
It suffocates.
Which brings us to the essential ingredients. What does the report say are the actual second-order conditions required for the CtR-PLC model to survive and thrive?
The report identifies several non-negotiables. First and foremost, protected time for inquiry.
Which sounds completely obvious to anyone outside of education. But inside a school, it is a radical, almost impossible demand.
It is the most precious, fiercely contested commodity in education. Time. If inquiry, if this collaborative research is treated as an extracurricular add-on.
Like an afterthought.
Like something teachers are expected to do on a Friday evening after a 50-hour week of teaching and grading, it will die. It will breed resentment.
So what's the alternative?
The school timetable must actually be structurally adjusted by leadership to protect collaborative time during the working day.
Okay, so time is number 1. What's number 2?
Second, there must be distributed educator support.
And third?
Absolute leadership and head teacher alignment. And let's be clear, the principal can't just passively approve of it.
They can't just send an email saying, I support your PLC, good luck.
No, they have to actively legitimize it.
Yeah.
Because the report talks a lot about boundary tensions and translation work.
Right. Maintaining this new safe space for inquiry. this fragile boundary between the demanding theoretical university world and the chaotic immediate school world. It requires intense, ongoing labor, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The space for inquiry is not an inherently stable structure. It doesn't just happen automatically once you sign a memo or hold a kickoff meeting.
It wants to collapse back into the status quo.
Yes. It requires sustained resourcing. It requires highly skilled local facilitators who know how to manage the deep professional anxieties that arise when teachers start questioning their own long-held beliefs about their effectiveness.
It's scary for them.
It is terrifying. Without leadership explicitly valuing this messy, uncertain, and sometimes uncomfortable process, the boundary collapses and teachers retreat to the safety of what they already know.
I want you, the listener, to think about your own workplace, wherever you are listening to this right now.
Good exercise.
How often are you or your department asked to innovate or think outside the box or be agile without being given a single hour of protected time to actually think about how to do it?
Happens all the time.
We constantly demand first-order results from our employees while completely neglecting the second-order conditions required to achieve them.
It is a guaranteed recipe for burnout.
Whether you are in a hospital, a tech startup, or a school in Kathmandu.
Which is exactly why the success of the Nepal pilot is so significant. Professor Nawali, Dr. Kirkman, Dr. Gautam, they didn't just tell teachers to be better.
No.
They worked tirelessly with the school leadership to build the second-order architecture that allowed the teachers the space and safety to become better.
So the pilot worked. 60 teachers, 4 diverse community schools, massive paradigm shifts, real systemic transformation.
Truly remarkable.
But 4 schools in the Kathmandu Valley is still just a pilot.
It is.
How does this team and their international partners propose rolling this out to transform a whole nation's education system? Because scaling is where good ideas usually die.
Section 6 of the report is vital here because it serves as a highly pragmatic blueprint for the future. They outline 6 specific interlocking features that make CtR-PLCs perfectly suited for scaling within Nepal's specific educational and political landscape.
Let's really dig into those 6 features, because this is where the rubber meets the road. Feature 1.
First is cost efficiency.
How so?
Because this model relies fundamentally on building internal school capacity rather than constantly flying in external consultants or paying for endless hotel conferences. The ongoing financial burden is radically lower.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate again.
Bring it on.
If it is so cheap and so effective, why hasn't every government in the world already done it?
Because it requires relinquishing control, which for a centralized bureaucracy is far harder than spending money. Buying a massive training program gives the illusion of immediate action.
You get the photo op.
You get the photo op.
Yeah.
Cultivating a grassroots network of inquiring teachers takes time and trust, which are politically difficult to measure in a single election cycle.
That is a brilliant point. Okay, what is the second feature for scale?
Sustainability.
In contrast to the cascade model.
Yes. In the cascade model, when the donor funding dries up and the NGO leaves, the training stops.
It just disappears.
In the CtR-PLC model, the knowledge and the capacity to generate new knowledge are retained internally within the teaching staff. It breaks the agonizing cycle of donor dependency.
Third is cultural adaptability. We touched on this, but let's reemphasize it.
Okay.
Because the solutions and the inquiries emerged locally from the teachers themselves, there is zero risk of a one-size-fits-all mandate failing.
Exactly. The model organically adapts whether the school is in a dense urban center or a remote mountain village.
Fourth feature.
It aligns perfectly with existing national policy goals.
Wait, really? The government wants this.
The Nepali government, like many governments, explicitly states they want an evidence-informed teaching workforce, but they've struggled to achieve it.
Because of the cascade failure.
Yes. This model actually operationalizes that high-level policy goal on the ground.
Fifth is a really interesting one regarding political structure. It's compatible with decentralized governance.
Yes, and this is crucial for the context of Nepal. As Nepal has transitioned to a federal structure, empowering municipal and provincial networks to manage their own education.
The centralized cascade model makes less and less sense.
It makes no sense. This CtR-PLC model can slot right into those localized school clusters, empowering local governments to manage their own professional development.
And finally, the sixth feature, university-embedded partnerships.
Yes. By linking local schools directly with universities like KU and TU, It creates a symbiotic ecosystem.
Symbiotic how?
Both institutions grow. The schools get rigorous, non-directive facilitation support. And the universities stay deeply grounded in the actual current realities of frontline education.
Preventing them from becoming isolated ivory towers.
Precisely. But to make this scale-up actually happen across hundreds of schools, the report is clear about what is practically needed.
It requires investment.
It requires investment, but a radically different kind of investment.
Yeah. Right. What is the practical shopping list here?
We don't need millions of dollars for glossy new training manuals or massive kickoff events.
Thank goodness.
First, we desperately need a trained pipeline of local facilitators. We need to identify and develop educators who know how to hold that boundary space.
Who know how to ask the right questions without giving the answers.
Exactly. And they need modest operational funding. We aren't talking huge budgets.
Just enough for what?
Just enough resources for travel, for follow-up visits, to maintain the momentum and protect the continuity of these groups over months and years.
Crucially, scaling requires school leadership enablement. Head teachers must be actively supported by their municipalities to treat this collaborative inquiry as core work, not an extra duty.
It has to be codified on the official timetable.
And finally, they stress evaluation for scale. We need to track how this works as it spreads.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean just tracking student test scores.
What does it mean?
It means tracking fidelity to the core principles. Ensuring the ethical standards, the non-extractive, psychologically safe environment established by the pilot team are meticulously maintained.
While still allowing for natural local adaptation.
Right. You have to constantly measure the health of the organizational conditions, the second-order architecture.
So, to recap the massive journey we've taken today,
It's been a big one.
we've moved from an exploration of a globally broken, heavily funded, top-down training model, that cascade of distorted, decontextualized information,
The broken oven.
the broken oven,
Yeah.
to a beautifully complex relational model where teachers reclaim their professional agency. We've seen how giving teachers the protected space and the psychological safety to investigate their own specific problems leads to profound professional ontological shifts.
And as we close, we have to continually recognize that this shift was only made possible by the incredible foundational work, the deep cultural understanding, and the visionary leadership of people like Professor Dr. Lax Mandawali, Dr. Ganga Gautam, Dr. Phil Kirkman, and their wider international team.
The architects.
The architects. They proved, with rigorous qualitative data, that university-school partnerships can and absolutely should be built on a foundation of humility, mutual respect, and shared inquiry.
They didn't just write a report, they built the architecture for a quiet revolution in how we respect the teaching profession.
They did. And if we connect this to the absolute biggest picture, it leaves us with a rather staggering question to consider.
Okay, let's hear it.
The data we examined today is specifically about community schools in the Kathmandu Valley. But the human organizational dynamics, they are universal.
Totally.
If treating frontline workers as the creators of knowledge rather than the passive receivers of instructions can so radically transform a complex educational system, what would happen if we applied this exact, close-to-research model to other failing systems?
What would happen if we applied it to our exhausted healthcare systems?
Yeah.
Or to our stagnant corporate offices? Or to our deeply frustrated local governments?
That is a provocative thought to leave on. What systemic failures in your own industry, in your own daily work, are just waiting for the people on the actual ground to be given the time, the trust, and the protected, boundary-held space to solve them?
The solutions to our most complex systemic problems are rarely found in the boardroom or the ministry headquarters.
No. They're usually found by the people dealing with the critical incidents on the front line every single day.
Which brings us right back to where we started. If you want an accurate diagnosis of a broken system, you don't just stare at a spreadsheet from 1,000 miles away and guess. You ask the person who operates the system what they think is wrong with it, and you give them the tools to fix it. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. Keep questioning the process, keep looking for the second-order architecture, and we'll see you next time.